Good morning, everyone. Hola, buenos días. Bienvenidos a todos. We do have translation available for this event. Welcome to Immigration Enforcement and the Unauthorized Practice of Law in the San Joaquin Valley. If you are on a computer, you will see a globe pop up on the bottom of the screen. If you're on your phone, you will see 3 dots on the bottom, right-hand side of your screen. Click on these and select the languages you speak. If for some reason the original speaker sounds louder than the interpreter you're listening to, you can select the option to mute your original audio at any moment. Estas son las instrucciones para seleccionar la interpretación al español. Cuando activamos la función de interpretación de Zoom, si está en una computadora, verá un globo emergente en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Si está en su teléfono, verá 3 puntos en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla. Haga clic en estos y seleccione el idioma que habla. Si por alguna razón el altavoz original suena más fuerte que el intérprete que está escuchando, puede seleccionar la opción para silenciar el audio original en cualquier momento. Again, welcome everyone to Immigration Enforcement and the Unauthorized Practice of Law in the Golden State, presented by the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund Immigration Policy Subcommittee. Today, I will be one of your main moderators. My name is Eduardo Ramirez Castro. I'm the Associate Project Director of the Sustainable Rural Communities Project at California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, based out of the Fresno office. And I will be joined as well by other amazing individuals who have been supporting this event and who are doing amazing behind the scenes work to make sure we have a successful equity on the mall. Although today we're going to be talking about immigration enforcement and the unauthorized practice of immigration law and other related immigration topics, I invite you to also join the other panelists and the other presentations and policy briefings and celebratory events going on this Equity on the Mall week. As you can see on the chat, you will be able to find a link to the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund Equity on the Mall webpage when you can see the list of events scheduled for the rest of today and for tomorrow. I invite you to register and participate in each event, as you will hear from incredible advocates doing real life-changing work across the San Joaquin Valley. So just to lay some groundwork, today's presentation, we're going to be doing a welcome and introduction of the Immigration Policy Subcommittee, and we're also going to be unveiling the 2021 Immigration Policy Platform. And then we're going to be followed by a panel discussion. And then we're going to be offering a few minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to make note of them and share them in the chat box. And we'll be opening the forum to address some of these questions towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so a little bit of background of, the Immigration Policy Subcommittee co-chairs. So again, I'm Eduardo Ramirez Castro from California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. And also I'm joined by Allison Davenport, supervising attorney at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. We have been the Immigration Policy Subcommittee co-chairs for the past 2 years. And really the great work that we all have been doing wouldn't be possible without so many other organizations who will give brief mention in a few seconds, who also work together to really promote equity and immigrant justice across the region. And also, all our work would not be possible without, the help of one very special volunteer who has been really helping us along the way. He tends to make a lot of typos, so I apologize in advance if you find any throughout the presentation. His name is Timmy Ramirez. He's our executive assistant to the immigration co-chairs. As you can see, he's been very busy lately drafting the agendas and sending out emails and coordinating the event. So he's been doing a lot of background work. So you might see him in the background during the presentation. So a huge thank you to Timmy for all his help leading up to this event. Okay. So what is or who are the Immigration Policy Subcommittee organizations? So In summary, the Immigration Policy Subcommittee is comprised of over 30 immigrant and refugee serving organizations in the Central Valley. Each year, this committee develops a policy platform that serves as a year-round organizing tool that fuels partners' local, regional, and statewide advocacy, and partners' ongoing partnerships with impacted communities, selected or elected representatives, and also policymakers. The 2021 Immigration Policy Platform, which we will present today, is both opportunistic and aspirational, and it is a reflection of the promise of the San Joaquin Valley and the commitment of its grassroots and organizational leaders to advance health and racial equity. So the 2021 Immigration Policy Platform, is really designed to carry out this vision. We as San Joaquin Valley Health Fund grantees and partner organizations, are committed to working towards ensuring inclusive communities where all immigrants and refugees, regardless of immigration status or income or place of residence, enjoy access to support services, economic opportunity, high quality legal representation, and meaningful civic participation. A just, equitable, and prosperous San Joaquin Valley requires an inclusive democracy and due process for all. And of course, working towards this vision and making it a reality comes with several challenges that we do not ignore, but challenges that we embrace, and challenges that we seek to understand so that we can address the root issues that causing many of these health inequities and racial disparities and justice disparities across the region. Immigrants and refugees are critical to California and are at the heart of the San Joaquin Valley. In 2018, the estimated immigrant population for the 8 counties in the region was nearly 900,000. Foreign-born persons comprise 22% of the population in the San Joaquin Valley and 34% of the workforce. The region has a long history of refugee resettlement from many parts of the world, including Southeast Asia, Central America, and the Middle East, trends that continue to this day. In the San Joaquin Valley, 319,000 undocumented immigrants call the region home, and 349,000 US citizens and another 86,000 lawful permanent residents reside with an undocumented family member. Approximately 13% of California's DACA eligible population lives in the San Joaquin Valley. Limited English proficiency, lower educational attainment, and poverty rates are at higher levels in the San Joaquin Valley than in most other regions of the state. Changes to federal policies have created fear among immigrant and refugee communities. And community organizations have responded to these attacks in the absence of systemic response by local governments in the region. For instance, a change in public charge rule instilled fear in low-income immigrants around access to critical social services. This has been especially devastating during the pandemic when communities of color, including immigrants and essential workers and farm workers, have been disproportionately impacted by the virus and the resulting economic hardships. Immigrant families are often left out of economic relief and recovery programs or are fearful of receiving assistance due to immigration status. Immigration enforcement leaves low-income immigrants in the region vulnerable to detention and without the ability to pay bond, resulting in family separations and financial hardship. In 2018, there were 2,279 ICE-related arrests in the San Joaquin Valley, with Kern County having the highest number of arrests, that being 1,235. The dearth of low-cost quality legal service providers in the region, particularly in rural areas, means that many immigrants ordered to appear in immigration court cannot secure legal representation, which greatly reduces their chance of being granted relief. And embracing these challenges, we have come together to create a pathway to address the challenges and attacks on our immigrant and refugee communities. All the San Joaquin Valley health organizations and partner organizations, within the region and from other regions of the state, stand united in our call to secure robust public and private investments to facilitate COVID-19 economic relief and recovery for all families and small business owners, regardless of immigration status. If the pandemic has really shown something, is the inequity in accessing relief programs for those marginalized communities, specifically our immigrant communities in the San Joaquin Valley, who were often excluded from the initial relief programs available by the federal government and even by some local governments. We had a great response by the private sector, such as the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund, who provided funds to be able to assist families immediately, early on in the pandemic, to address those populations who were excluded from economic relief stimulus payments under the CARE Act. And we understand that a recovery from the pandemic is going to require both robust public investment and investment from the private sector as well, to be able to keep our economy on the mend and to be able to ensure that we have an inclusive recovery for all. Oops, sorry. We want to ensure that every government and public institution provides equitable language access and treats residents with utmost respect and dignity. Even though we have language access laws, oftentimes they don't do enough. Too many times we hear stories of our constituents who face discrimination or mistreatment due to the language they speak. We have heard from COVID-19 patients who have been in the hospital for days and have trouble communicating with their nurses who don't speak their native language, even though when they have access to language access interpretation that is often underutilized. So we want to make sure that our residents who are navigating public institutions, public agencies, that they are treated with respect and dignity. We want to ensure that the needs and voices of our communities are represented in the redistricting process. We know that political representation is key to a successful immigrant integration across the region. And we want to make sure that our diversity is reflected in the leadership across constituencies in the region. We are united in our call to secure partnerships with local governments and educational institutions to encourage pro-immigrant policies and increase opportunities for education, inclusion, and access to support services. We want to build on the great work that we've been doing across the region on partnering with, for example, local educational institutions to aid in the implementation of the immigrant incorporation. Educational agencies and institutions are one of the public institutions that a lot of our mixed immigration status families have to interface on a daily basis, either because they themselves are in educational institutions, such as vocational programs, community colleges, or universities, or because their children are attending K-12 schools in the region. So we want to make sure that these agencies and institutions that have continuous and regular contact with our residents, that they are responsive to their needs and aiding their successful incorporation. We also want to abolish the racial profiling and mass incarceration of immigrants in the San Joaquin Valley. Our region has been a target of targeted immigration enforcement for many years. And we know that this targeted enforcement results in mass incarceration in the San Joaquin Valley, which incarcerates not only San Joaquin Valley residents, but all their vulnerable community members from across the state. We also advocate for the full implementation of SB 54 to ensure local law enforcement agencies respect the rights of immigrants in alignment with California law, and the local governments enact even more protective policies. We want our community members to see our law enforcement as an ally, somebody who can protect and serve them and look out for their best interest. Too often, the entanglement between local law enforcement and ICE has resulted in damaging the credibility and the relationship between local law enforcement and the community. Too often, because of this relationship, our communities are very vulnerable to crime and are less likely to report such crime when they become victims. We're also united in our call to support the establishment of an immigration bond fund and a removal defense fund without restrictions based on criminal history in every county and major city in the San Joaquin Valley to support individuals in detention and removal proceedings. As many of you know, and as many of you don't, those individuals who have to go to immigration court are not guaranteed an immigration lawyer to represent them in their civil cases. Although a lot of these cases, do result in very, very extreme hardship. As one judge pointed out, immigration removal proceedings for individuals without a legal representation are very similar as to if we were to have traffic tickets and sentencing them to death. A lot of individuals have trouble accessing legal representation because of the cost and also because of the lack of human capacity and resources in the regions where there are a lot of underserved communities. So we want to make sure that our local government understands that they can play a role and they should be playing a role in facilitating access to counsel in immigration proceedings. We also promote public and private funding initiatives that, number one, foster the growth and sustainability of nonprofit immigration legal service providers serving rural and remote urban areas, and two, that are reflective of and responsive to the legal needs of the San Joaquin Valley residents. We also advocate for accessible and inclusive pathways to legal protections and citizenship for immigrants and policies that keep families together. There's a lot of conversation recently about immigration reforms and what that will look like, and what are some of the potential trade-offs between humanitarian protections, family unity, and other variables such as immigration enforcement and removal. Too often, proposals prioritize immigration enforcement and militarized enforcement at the border and in our communities, and prioritize that over naturalizing individuals who have been in this country for decades and for generations. We want to make sure that any immigration policy reform, and whether it's through actual statutory reform or through administrative procedures or through executive orders, we want to make sure that any protections keeps in mind the best interest of our diverse immigrant communities and that lead to a path to naturalization, which is the best and most secure kind of immigration status that an individual can have, and so that they can remain permanently in this country. We also understand that we need to strengthen consumer protections against immigration fraud by predatory notarios, also known, many of them, as immigration consultants, and also fraudulent attorneys who often prey on immigrant populations and defraud them in their immigration cases. As an organization, who provides direct services here in the San Joaquin Valley, and many other organizations joining us here today can relate, too often our communities are victims of immigration legal services fraud. A lot of them have their cases damaged so much that they are barred from accessing any kind of immigration relief that they were initially eligible for. So it's very important that we are promoting a robust network of immigration advocates and service providers who are qualified and who are trained to provide immigration services. Immigration law is the second most complicated area of law after tax law. So we need to provide investments and support and technical assistance and logistics and infrastructure that reflects that. So to help us understand more about the impact that enforcement has had in the Central Valley, we're joined by Allison Davenport from the Immigration Legal Resource Center. Allison joined ILRC in 2015 as a staff attorney based in California's Central Valley, where she was born and raised. Prior to joining the ILRC, she was a clinical instructor with the International Human Rights Law Clinic at UC Berkeley School of Law. At the clinic, she directed the establishment of the Legal Support Program for undocumented students, the documentation of human rights abuses against LGBTI individuals in El Salvador, and the promotion of equal access to clean water in California. Allison practiced immigration law, first in private practice, and then as a founder of the Immigration Legal Services Program at Centro Legal de la Raza. Allison also formerly worked as a staff attorney with the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies at UC Hastings. She graduated from UC Berkeley with a JD and an MA in Latin American Studies. Allison speaks Spanish fluently, and she is a beloved community member and advocate of the San Joaquin Valley. So I'll pass it on to you, Allison.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, and thank you everyone for participating in today's panel. This is such an important time to be talking about immigrant rights and how our region is particularly impacted. So I'm going to take a few minutes and just discuss some issues around immigration enforcement. And, you know, I think we have all been talking or hearing a lot about family separation at the border. And you know, the tragic consequences of that shameful practice. But the reality is our immigration laws create family separation every day. And we're seeing family separation in our communities across the San Joaquin Valley on a regular basis due to the arrest, detention, and deportation of local immigrant community members. So we need to do more as a state, as local institutions to protect our immigrant community members and against the harmful impacts of immigration enforcement. I'm going to kind of touch on three main things that I think we can do to better support our immigrant community members and kind of create that support network to prevent family separation and the harmful impacts of enforcement. First is to limit ICE presence in our community and completely disentangle our local law enforcement agencies from immigration officials. We see ICE conducting enforcement operations in our communities in ways that is really traumatizing to immigrant families and to all community members. Folks are being arrested at courthouses. We have particular problems with courthouse arrests here in the San Joaquin Valley. We see traffic stops in the early morning, which disproportionately impact our farm worker communities. There are checkpoints in particular neighborhoods, near schools, in places where it really disproportionately impacts Latino communities in particular. And we're also seeing the arrest of people in front of their children, which has devastating health and mental health impacts on our young people. So the way arrests are happening, the way enforcement takes place, how can we push back to make sure that ICE is not present in our communities, terrorizing our communities in this way? We also need to disentangle our local law enforcement agencies from ICE enforcement completely. This is the main pipeline for immigration, detention, and deportation is through the criminal system. California has really been a leader in setting limits and boundaries between our local law enforcement and immigration enforcement. So laws like SB 54, kind of known as the sanctuary law, tries to limit or provide guidance on when and how local law enforcement can cooperate with ICE. But the truth is, as a region, we have not benefited from these laws because our local law enforcement have found workarounds to these laws and have continued to collaborate in different ways with ICE agents. So that pipeline is continuing in the same way as before. As Eduardo mentioned in his presentation, according to recent data, there were over 2,200 ICE arrests in our region. Nearly half of those took place in Kern County. So we just have an incredible amount of ICE immigration enforcement that's impacting our local communities. And again, the main way that happens is through our local law enforcement officials, despite the protective laws that California has passed. So what we need is very clear guidance about a complete prohibition on cooperation between local law enforcement and immigration officials so that there is no possibilities for these workarounds or kind of creative ways that cooperation can happen. We also need reporting mechanisms and oversight from our elected leaders. Right now, the burden is on community members and advocates to try to create accountability by our local law enforcement agencies around the laws that exist right now, but we need more oversight coming from the state. So clear, bright line rules for local law enforcement with oversight and reporting mechanisms that work. We also have seen, a second area of enforcement that's been very harmful is the absolute explosion of immigration detention in our region. We went from detention bed space in immigration detention facilities in the San Joaquin Valley from 400 capacity to 1,400 capacity. So just an incredible explosion just in 2020. This is all through private prison corporations kind of capitalizing on the attacks on immigrants and this increased enforcement and detention of immigrant communities. Again, the communities stepped up that were impacted, saying we don't want these detention facilities in our backyards. We don't want to be a place where we detain and harm immigrant community members in this way. And yet, despite that, we've seen this explosion just in the last year. We really need to pull back from immigration detention altogether. There are alternatives to detention. There's alternative ways to ensure people get the support they need, that they appear for court hearings, and that they have their legal process played out without them being in detention, especially during the pandemic when the public health impacts are so dire. We also need to see a really targeted investment in our regional capacity around education and legal services, focusing on the immigrant communities and the diverse immigrant communities that live here in the San Joaquin Valley. My colleagues are going to talk in a little bit about the harms of the unauthorized practice of law and the immigration fraud that's really rampant in our communities. But one way that the best tool we have to combat immigration fraud is to build our legal services capacity and create more resources, more legal service providers who are ready to assist community members for free in their communities, accessible legal services in their language, in their communities, that's high quality. People turn to these fraudulent providers because they don't have anywhere else to go. We need more investment in our communities, in our legal service organizations, and in our community-based organizations to provide that support to immigrant families. We had a recent victory in this regard. Very recently, the state did approve funding for a legal fellowship program to serve 2 underserved areas of California. So to train and place new immigration attorneys in underserved regions, including the San Joaquin Valley. We now have 6 legal fellows providing legal services here in the San Joaquin Valley. That's more than doubling the number of attorneys providing free legal services in immigration court to San Joaquin Valley residents than there was a year ago. But we need that kind of targeted investment, especially regarding people in detention, especially regarding people in removal proceedings in front of immigration court. Our capacity is growing, but we're just very, very far behind the need based on those numbers you heard during Eduardo's presentation about, just the scope of the immigrant community here in our region. Sometimes funding becomes available for legal services, and some of our local immigration legal service providers, our nonprofit organizations, don't meet those requirements. So we need these kind of targeted capacity building investments in order to kind of get to where we need to be to ensure that families have access to high quality legal services and aren't victims of fraud. The other important aspect of that type of investment is that, as Eduardo mentioned, the court that has jurisdiction over immigration cases here in the San Joaquin Valley is in San Francisco. So it's very complicated and expensive to provide legal services to families in the San Joaquin Valley when their court hearings take place, anywhere from 3 to 6 hours away from their homes. So getting people to court, working with witnesses and family members, ensuring transportation, all of those things create a lot of barriers barriers that are difficult. There's difficulties for all immigrants navigating the immigration court system, but for those who are in these rural, remote areas, having to go to these nearby urban centers where the courts are located, it just creates undue burdens on the families that are impacted as well as their legal service providers. So again, this is a complex problem we have to combat and push back in many different fronts, but immigration enforcement, we can see the impact lessen if we limit ICE presence in our communities and eliminate their cooperation with our local law enforcement agencies. We reduce the detention of immigrants in our region and throughout the country and create community-based alternatives to detention. And we invest in the capacity of legal services providers to prevent people from being in the situation where they end up in immigration court in the first place, that they're able to secure benefits, but if they are, they're guaranteed access to free, high-quality legal support that they need to navigate that system. I'm going to leave my comments there, and Eduardo, you can help us navigate to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Allison, for that great discussion. Now we're going to go ahead and go to our next panelist, who's going to be talking about some of the efforts his organization has been doing on the ground, helping individuals who have been vulnerable, to immigration enforcement, and to also who have, been, very resilient and who have, overcome tremendous challenges, and the great partnership that his organization has had with the community members as well. Give me one second. Apologies. So our next speaker is Sothea Ng. He is a program manager at Asian Pacific Self-Development and Residential Association, known as APSARA. Sothea joined APSARA as a volunteer in 2012, and soon after he was recruited as a social services coordinator and a program manager. He has been working in the community since 1998 and loves to work with people, and he is very grateful to be able to work along his community and to see his community's members succeed and grow as individuals. So please welcome and extend the floor to Sothea.
Sorry, I was not unmuted yet. Thank you so much, Adoro. And please allow me to share my screen. So I would like to share my screen right now. Let me do this, sorry. Okay, please give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation. Sorry, good. Thank you. So again, my name is Sothea. I'm representing APSARA, so Asian Pacific Self-Development and Residential Association. So today we want to talk about the immigration services. I have myself here, and I have two of my organizers, and I have a few stories to say as well. So a little bit about our story. So APSARA is a grassroots membership organization. We are home to the largest concentration of Southeast Asian population in Stockton and Central Valley as a whole. And we are the last remaining affordable housing property collectively owned by Cambodian refugees in the United States. So there was 6 originally, but APSARA is the only one standing as a refugee-owned housing property. APSARA has been an anchor institution to the Southeast Asian community in Stockton. We providing space, organizing infrastructure, leadership for community work, and we also provide services for deportation defense. We have people access to healthcare. We also working on the youth development as well, and we also have other programs that are including housing. And lately, we also working very closely with the other local partner on COVID-19 as well. So Stockton is our home. So this is the photo that I get from the temple. It's called Guatemala Buddhist temple. And this is the website. We call it our home after we arrived here as a refugee in 1980. And we have the community center. This is the APSARA community center when we practice we hold the ceremony. We have this is one of our events that we host, and this is a period to COVID. But right now, currently we close. We've been providing services, and most of our team they are refugee background. They came here in 1980. So I would like to share a little bit of story of one of my team. Her name is Wana Budin. She was on the panelist. So Wana, could you unmute yourself and introduce yourself and share more about your story? Go ahead, Wana.
Yes. Good morning, team. Again, thank you so much for having me here, Sotia. Thank you for putting me on this platform. I appreciate that very much. Yes, I am, like many other Southeast Asians, as refugee, came to America in 1980. I was 17 years old, didn't speak a word of English, struggled with language barrier, cultural barriers, and have witnessed many injustices that done into our community for those who. In 1980s, large influx of Southeast Asians and Americans were not ready to receive us and don't know who we were and why we're here. They have learned about Vietnam War, and that's about the only platform that they're familiar with. But for Cambodian, Laotians, and other ethnic who came as refugees during this era was unknown. And it was so dramatic because when we came to America without the language, we faced, my family and other community members faced many racial tensions and discriminations at work and school. And I have witnessed a lot of my peers during high school have joined gangs and drugs and into violent crimes, and that lead to many unhappy mishap and incidences. And after I graduated from high school, I was 21 and a half, and that's the only place that I can be starting school, get my basic education. So I went on and got hired as a community liaison working with a nonprofit organization. There I started to help bridging the community's members and the service provider. So with the language that I possess in Cambodian, Laotian, and Thai, that was very equitable to be able to provide and advocate for those who don't speak the language. And also in later life, I worked with APSARA, and there's where I really got the opportunity to work with family who have faced deportations, and more of housing discriminations, homelessness, and health disparities and language disparities, so far, so forth. Even after 4 decades of living in America, we're still finding people who in a non-immigrant status, losing their identities and all their important information to go about and apply for citizenship. And due to the language barrier, people don't understand it, that living in America, you have to apply for citizenships or move your status from refugees to residential. So after I was able to work with, numbers of family who facing deportations, and working with family with the same situations in immigration issue. We work with people who still I-94, who had never possessed a green card in the last 40 years. So it's been a struggle because some of the information were missing, but APSARA have been working. We have dedicated staff who work endless hours to help them establish their status and help them apply. We have so many success stories, people that we come across to work with. And Satir has been, he been wonder, and he worked. I seen him work endless hours. Sometime at 1 a.m, I've still seen him working. So yes, I have great leaders. APSARA has been instrumentals, and I've been with them couple of times, and this is my second opportunity working with them there. I'm so glad that I'm able to be here to work with APSARA and to continue the services to provide to those who most need it in the immigration platform.
Thank you so much, Vana. To continue with that, I just want to add a little bit that Vana was come here as a refugee, but Vana was been through life, but Vana was able to navigate it and get to the education and get a proper education and get a job. But we also have a story which is the opposite. So this is another story from our resident. Her name is Lai Hieng, and you can find the story in the recordnet.com that she has been shared for a couple of times. I trying to get her to the video and get recorded, but she was very emotional. Anytime that when she's talking about the deportation experience, she always cry, and it's very hard for her. So I would like to play a very short of her voice, and then but I will explain the story in a more detail. So sorry, I cannot see the bottom that I can pause it. Let me try it again. Sorry. Okay, so what's she trying to say? That she said that her name is Lai Hieng. Right now, she's living in Stockton, California, and I will play that when she shared the story about her son, one of her son that got deported to Cambodia. Sorry, I cannot. I cannot hear the rest of the story. Please allow me, let me more down. Let me play. I will move the screen smaller, and then I will play it again. I don't know how to exit this full screen right here. Okay, this is much better. I apologize. I get the wrong file. Please allow me to get it back again. Sorry about that. So since we're waiting, so I would like to continue speaking, but I will play her voice to explain more about the story. So this is one of our residents that came here in 1980 without any proper education. So they are the farmer. So when they came here as a refugee, I believe that if it happened in any city in California, the city is not ready. So they was in place in one place to another. Most of them are low-income housing, and most of them are got car fresh. So what happened to them is they could not go to school because they have little kid with them. And then most of the kids that came to the state at that time, it was like 9 years old, 14 years old, similar to Wana just said. So most of them do not have the language capacity, right? So they was placed into the class by their age. For example, one of our residents was placed into like high school because they came here, was like 12 years old already, or 13 years old already. It placed to class 7 or class 8. So most of them, like more than 80% of them, would drop out of school. And you know what happened when they drop out of school? So they starting to forming, starting to get more involved into gang activity and getting more into drug. So then later on, they are facing, they are, like got caught it, and then they've been labeled as a criminal. But eventually, the story of that is that the family that came here, so they do not know the law. So like for example, there's a story of her that one of her kids got bullied at school, and she was coming back home, trying to explain to the mom, but the mom could not understand. So the story escalated to a higher. So the conflict between the kid at school, it get higher and higher, more intense. So the school tried to connect to the mom, but the mom could not respond to the school, and the school do not have the interpreter at that time. So what was a gap between the community and between the community and the school and the law enforcement, so that you see that many of them was booked into jail as a juvenile. So they went to the juvenile, they went to the court, and then later on they was you know, like putting them into the one of them is one of her son is they filing against him as a first-degree murder. So her son was booked into the jail, and then later on was get out after a few years, but the trouble is still going on. In 2007, he was get out from the jail, and the I was pick him up and was deporting him to Cambodia. And the story of her is that she have 4 kids when she arrived in the United States, but 3 of her kids, 2 of her kids were passed away of illness, but one of her son was get shot by the drive-by shooting. So he was sitting in the house, and the person will drive by and shoot to the other person of her neighbor and accidentally kill her son. So she had only one son, and her son was deported in 2000, I believe in 2012. So her son was deported to Cambodia. So right now she's living alone without any family member, and she right now have a very difficult in many ways. So one is the mental health. Second is she living in a low-income housing, so without any family that taking care of her. So, and right now she's looking for support, so to find a way to sponsor her son back to United States. The second story that I want to share is, I could not share his photo, but he allowed me to share his name. So her name is Kip Hin. So Kip Hin was booked into jail in between 2000 and 2005 regarding to a crime that he using a bound checks. So it was he write a check to the car dealer, and then the car dealer could not cash the check, and he was reported to the police, and then he was booked into jail. But when he get out from jail, he need to report every month to the ICE. And then one day he just walking with with her daughter in front of the door, and the ICE was come and pick him up. And this is the story that he shared. Please allow me to play. I will play shortly about his boy, and then I will help tell the whole story. So the way he explained of the way that ICE come to arrested him, he do not know that he was commit any more crime or he do anything wrong. So one day, without any anything, ICE was come to pick him up in front of the house. What the most important part I want to share here is he got arrested in front of his granddaughter. and her granddaughter at that time was, I believe, it's just 4 years old. And his stepdaughter was in the house, was crying, and she doesn't know what's going on. And I not even explained to the family that where he taken him and why they taken him. And then he was booked into the detention center. But Kub was lucky that he was very fortunate that he'd been reached out by Asian Law Caucus. So the Asian Law Caucus have reached out to him and represent him into the case. And also Asian Law Caucus also connect him to APSARA. So Kub was one of our deportee client who get support from Asian Law Caucus and APSARA. So in 2019, before COVID, he was granted. So his case was dropped because of I believe that because of the law have changed, and his period crime is not deportable. But here is the point. It's not all the people like Kub get supported. So many of them do not get supported on time. So they were signing voluntarily to be deported. And many of them has been deported for the same crime or less than crime like what he committed. So there's 100 of Cambodian or other Southeast Asian clients right now that are facing the same issue, and they need support. I will stop here for the story, and then I will let one of my team here to share about his experience. His name is Singh. Could you please? Oh, sorry, I get the time reminding, so I will wrap it up. But could you allow me 1 minute for Singh to speak a bit about his experience? Hossein, could you unmute yourself and speak?
Hello, everybody. My name is Singh So. I'm originally from Cambodia. Let me let you know that about my history. I've made my study in Cambodia originally in the countryside, and then when I go to high school, I came from after the coup of 1970. I went to Phnom Penh, and then Khmer Rouge arrived in April 1975. I was evacuated to the countryside. We lived in severe condition for 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days. We have been working very hard under the rain and the hot water without enough without anything for eating. In the morning, without breakfast, we have only soup or rice, without meat, without medicine when we got ill. And then after the Khmer Rouge, my father died, and without medicine for curing him. And then I tried to earn my living by myself, and I play as a role or father to feed my five brother and sister. I play a role as a father. And then after that, in 1982, I started working with the Cambodian New Agency. I translated new from French and English from English into Khmer, Cambodian. Cambodian is the same. In 1992, I started working with the Cambodian New Agency. The name of non-governmental organization is SIPA. That means Support Private Initiative for Reconstruction of South Asian Country. We we rebuild library, school library for children, or all out in around 500 in all Cambodia. We need we have a fund from European country. We try to establish to create everything so that the children, street children, children from the countryside can.
Hossein, please share your experience here with APSARA. So please do it just 1 minute. We don't have time, so sorry.
And then I worked for the NGO for 20 years, and then in 2014 I obtained a green card to live in United States, and then I work with I have been working with APSARA Association with my education from Cambodia. I can work with APSARA until now. Now I offer health education and support social service to the resident nearly 210 family in the Oak Park village, and I'm very happy to support them, to help them to have a better living, better life. I want to have healthy lifestyle for the family of my community, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hossein, and thank you to all the panelists. And I apologize for the time. So I just want to wrap it up. That Saint was came to the United States, and Saint was volunteer in APSARA, and APSARA was put him as the working training, and then is part of our immigration activities to help a new immigrant that came to the community, especially in Stockton, so they can pursue their life skill, their education, so they can get a proper job and helping their family. And again, I apologize for the time, and but there's a lot of story to share, but we don't have enough time. So thank you so much, and I will stay here for question, and I will put my email for the panelists and all the attendees as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Satya and APSARA and your fellow panelists. No need to apologize. This is great work that you're doing, and thank you so much for providing that testimony, and for your constituents for making the time to join us today. It's really incredible. Thank you so much. We're going to be moving on to our next panelist. I'm very glad to present you with Mario Gonzalez from Centro La Familia Advocacy Services. Mario is the Deputy Director of Centro La Familia, and he will be discussing and sharing with you some firsthand knowledge of his organization working with families who have been affected by predatory notarials, individuals generally known as engaging in the unauthorized practice of immigration law in the San Joaquin Valley, and sharing some of the struggles they had to go through, and the great work that Centro La Familia has been doing in the Fresno region and in the neighboring counties. So very happy to introduce you, Mario, and you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As mentioned, my name is Mario Gonzalez, Deputy Director with Centro La Familia. I am wearing my mask today because I am in the office. We continue to be open during this time, ensuring that anyone who needs access to any type of assistance can come to our office and get the assistance that they need. We thank you for this opportunity. But getting into the subject matter, as mentioned, we are a nonprofit. We provide a lot of immigration assistance to families in our community. We've been around since 1972, ensuring that families in need have access to the supports that they need. As of 2014, we became an organization that was recognized and accredited by the Department of Justice to the then the BIA, Board of Immigration Appeals, now the Office of Legal Access Programs, which allows us to be able to provide assistance to our immigrant community through applications for some kind of immigration relief. Currently, only an attorney or a recognized and accredited organization with accredited staff are able to provide legal counsel on immigration issues, providing support, providing guidance, answering any legal questions related to the immigration case or immigration history. Here in the state of California, we have a lot of individuals who are consultants, notarios, who fly-by-night individuals, and unfortunately attorneys who take advantage of our immigrant community. Here in the Central Valley, there are not a lot of organizations who provide access to immigration support. We have limited organizations, unfortunately, because, again, lack of funding and just there's a lot more need than we've been able to keep up with. We have great organizations locally like the United Farm Worker Foundation, CRLA, CVIIC, Centro, Familia, ALF, amongst others, who provide assistance to families here in Fresno County and the surrounding communities. But there's a lot of work, unfortunately, and a lot of families who need the assistance. And these families sometimes fall prey to unscrupulous individuals who take advantage of the fact that these families don't know the difference between a notario from Mexico or from Central America to a notario here in the United States. A notario in Mexico and some Central American countries requires a lot of training, a lot of education, usually at a doctoral level, a master's level, where a notario here in the United States, it's usually a one-day class. You go to a class on a Saturday, you learn how to identify a name from an ID, a license, or a passport, and connect that ID to the individual. That is what a notary does here in this country. And so it is unfortunate that the terminology for a notary and a notario are very similar. However, people who understand the language and understand the requirements of a notario in our Central American countries take advantage of the fact that the word is very similar. And through that, they take advantage of our community. What happens is they'll pose as immigration consultants or immigration experts and begin to assist families to apply for something they don't qualify for, putting them in danger of deportation, and many times sending them to the interviews in Juarez or their home country with no venue or opportunity to be able to come back into the country, not knowing the legal ramifications for these applications. It is very common and very unfortunate that our families are being taken advantage of, because it's not just the immigrant individual who is being taken advantage of, but our residents, our citizens who are applying and who are relying on these unscrupulous individuals to apply for their family member to keep families together. Speakers before me talked about the importance of family unity and the separation of families. It is not just immigration that's separating families. It is also these unscrupulous individuals, these notarios, these consultants who are in fact separating families by filing the wrong forms or filing forms that the individual does not qualify for. One thing we see a lot here in Fresno and in our surrounding communities is we have mothers or fathers who are here undocumented and have now a child, daughter or son who is over the age of 21. And because they are U.S. citizens, they're wanting their son or daughter to apply for them. That is true. A son or daughter can apply for a father or mother. However, they have to be able to have a waiver, a pardon of sorts, to be able to stay in the country and to be able to obtain residency, to be able to adjust their status or do consular processing. The majority of these individuals who came into the country without permission, came into the country undocumented, were not admitted at any time, need to then have a lawful permanent resident or U.S. citizen father or mother or a spouse who they can rely on for a pardon. What these notarios or consultants don't do is they don't check for that, or they don't know the legal ramifications for submitting an application for someone who doesn't qualify for a pardon, which then once that individual goes to a interview, they'll get barred from being able to enter the country from anywhere from 3 to 10 years, making that individual, that family member, have to stay outside of the country for at least 10 years before they can reapply and try to obtain status and come back into the country. So that in essence is family separation, and that happens way too often because notarios, consultants who are unable to and should not legally be able to practice immigration law are doing it and unfortunately taking advantage of our community members. We have heard from other speakers today that this process is very complex. that immigration law is the second most hardest form of law here in this country, that it is not a simple matter, but rather a very complex issue. And something as simple as renewing a green card could get someone deported if the proper measures are not taken. There's no such thing as a simple form. There's no such thing as a simple process. Every single application has to go through a legal interview, a legal consultation to ensure that this family who's going to be applying for some form of immigration relief or immigration benefit actually qualifies for that benefit. And more importantly, it is in the best interest to apply for the benefit. In some situations where there might have been some criminal background or criminal exposure, it is best at times not to apply until everything has been gone through and or paid for, or arrangements made to ensure that we're not exposing someone to a potential NTA notice to appear before an immigration judge. So with that said, we as a community have to do better. We have to ensure that our legislative people, our legislative representatives are taking into consideration the damage that's being done to community members, to our U.S. citizen brothers and sisters, our LPR brothers and sisters who are trying to keep their family together, who are trying to apply to obtain status, to get in the right line, as many people have spoken about, getting to the right line to be able to apply for some kind of immigration relief and keep the families together. But unfortunately, these notarios, these consultants who have never practiced law, who are not authorized to practice law, who don't have any kind of training, don't have the appropriate education to be able to do the work appropriately and correctly, are taken advantage of, charging really high prices, charging as if they were attorneys themselves, charging prices comparable to what an attorney would charge, and taking advantage of the situation, knowing that our immigrant community and our U.S. citizen and LPR individuals who are trying to unify the family are in need, and that there are not a lot of organizations locally who are able to provide the assistance. And because of that, since the competition is minimal, they take advantage of that and take advantage by helping a family or telling them, providing false hope, letting them know, oh, that attorney doesn't know what they're talking about, or that attorney, they misinformed you, can file this, you can file that, and really taking advantage and hurting our families. And it's not just the Hispanic community. It happens in our Southeast Asian communities. It happens in the Indian communities. It happens to any immigrant who is trying to apply for an immigration benefit. And we unfortunately get a lot of these cases ourselves through Centro Familia. Attorneys get these cases a lot, where now we have to try and find a way to fix a lot of the mistakes that occurred when a notario or a consultant try to help. And I say help with quotations because they did a lot more harm than they did any help. And so it really falls upon us to push for our legislative representatives to try and do something to better this, to make it easier for us to as a community hold these notarios accountable for the harm that they are doing. Currently, anyone who wants to open shop can open shop as long as they get a insurance bond. There's really no requirement. There's no training requirements. There's no ongoing training requirements. And the speaker after me, my colleague Noe, will talk more in depth about the importance of holding our individuals accountable through the legislative process. So I'll pass on the opportunity and the time to him so they can finish up with what has been done and what will continue. So Eduardo, if you want to pass it on, and I'll remain open for questions.
Thank you so much, Mario. This is a great summary of a very, very salient issue in the region and across the state. So thank you so much for sharing your on-the-ground experience. Your organization is very, very connected to the community, and has, firsthand knowledge of, of the degrees of these kinds of issues that we've been seeing. And thank you for the tremendous work that, that you do on behalf of our diverse communities in the region. And as Mario had mentioned, we have another panelist also who's going to be, talking a little bit more about an overview of the statewide policies related to the unauthorized practice of immigration law, and what the state has been doing and what are the conversations at the state level about this issue, and some of the work that, you know, a lot of organizations on this panel today, and who are also San Joaquin Valley Health Fund partners, have been working to address the statewide issue of unauthorized practice of law. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Noé Paramo. He is a legislative advocate and the director of the Sustainable Rural Communities Project at California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to him, and Noé, go ahead, take the floor. And I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint for you guys in a couple seconds here.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo. And as Eduardo gets the PowerPoint ready, thank you, Mario, for teeing it up and for laying the case, examples of what you're facing as a community-based organization on the ground and having to fix botched cases that come before you, and the reason why we need to address this issue of immigration consultants. So I will then provide this overview of what is happening statewide. Okay, you can go to the next one, Eduardo. There we go. And that's to aim to address the unauthorized practice of immigration law in California. Next. So as Mario referenced, the current law in California as it relates to immigration consultants is as follows. In 1986, as many of us remember, is when IRCA happened. The Immigration Reform and Control Act was passed. And so in California, in order to help people process forms, complete forms, the Immigration Consultant Act was passed. And that allowed for non-attorneys to help individuals file applications and submit those forms. So the act provided these several things that they could only do: complete the form provided by the federal agency or state agency, but not advising a person as to their answers on those forms. The second is they can translate a person's answers to the questions posed in those forms. And third is securing a person's supporting documents, such as birth certificates, which was necessary for the forms, and then submitting those forms on to the USCIS. And as Mario referenced, in order to be an immigration consultant, it's pretty simple. Almost anybody can do that, and then you get approved, and next thing you know, you're practicing immigration law. And they are as follows. You pass a background check, and then you submit to the Secretary of State this surety bond in $100,000 that you obtain. So you can do business in California. Then you complete this immigration consultant disclosure form. You get a valid current photo ID or passport photo, and you file $30, and now you're doing business. Next one. So to address these efforts, there have been several bills these last few years. First, in 2017, AB 638 by then Assemblywoman Caballero, today she's Senator Caballero, would have repealed the Immigration Consultant Act and abolished the industry effective of January 1 of 2020. That would have been last year. The bill did get through the Assembly. Unfortunately, it died on the Senate floor over much controversy. And what you saw was the consultants and the Notary Association lining up, opposing it and peeling off votes. And so the bill did not have the votes to move on. So then subsequently, another effort was tried 2 years ago. Carrillo, Assemblywoman Carrillo, through AB 1753, provided the unlawful for a person to compensate for compensation or other person authorized to practice law in the state. So this is another attempt to reform the Immigration Consultant Act. Okay. So that one also passed the Assembly, but was held in the Senate Appropriations Committee, so didn't make it to the floor. In those two bills, CRLA Foundation was a co-sponsor along with CHIRLA and Carecen. AB 753, Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors came on and co-sponsored the bills. Then last year, Senator Hueso introduced the bill, which is similar to what I'll talk about in a little bit, SB 670 by Senator Caballero, But that bill died in the Senate Judiciary Committee, so it wasn't heard. And so those three bills have been efforts to ban, reform, in the case of Wessel's bill, to essentially legitimize the industry, but to provide a little more education. So reform, but still allowing the industry to practice. So the next one. Eduardo, the next slide. Okay, so what does that mean for California and the feds? So currently, authorized to provide representation under federal law is the following: attorneys in good standing, accredited representatives, such as what Mario suggested, and organizations in the Central Valley are doing through the EOIR, unpaid law students supervised by an attorney, and reputable individuals with good moral character, provided they have a pre-existing relationship with the client and do not get paid. And then accredited officials of the client's foreign government. So what's California's law? Well, California says that no person shall practice law in California unless they're an active member of the state bar, provides that anyone engaged in the unauthorized practice is guilty of a misdemeanor, punishable by 1 year in county jail or a fine of up to $1,000 or both. And there's also existing law for increased penalties for second and subsequent offenses. And it also says that it provides, the California law provides it's unlawful for any person or compensation other than the person's authorized practice of law authorized by the federal law. So to present persons before the BIA, the USCIS, to engage in the business of act within the state, you can't, unless you're under the Immigration Consultants Chapter, which I just repeated. So there's the big loophole, the exception, where California law allows immigration consultants to work in this area, which is contrary to what the federal law says. So next one. Next slide. So let me show you some excerpts from the Senate Judiciary hearing, which just was held on April 27th, just this last Tuesday. And this was on SB 670, which is Senator Caballero's bill. So here, lifting language, it tells clearly through this analysis, the complexity of immigration law makes it unclear when an immigration consultant is engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. Immigration consultants in California are only authorized to provide non-legal assistance, such as completing immigration forms, translation services. The mere act of deciding which form or forms to complete on behalf of an immigrant involves complex legal issues that can affect whether an immigrant is ultimately deported or authorized to remain in the US. Mario gave a good example of this. The inadmissibility, the waivers, adjustment things are examples. So what's that mean? Immigration consultants likely are operating in violation of federal law, and there's reference to comments of prior analysis through the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so also that federal law provides more protection than the act. Federal law provides more protection than the Immigration Consultant Act. I repeat, okay? So federal law does not recognize immigration consultants or permit non-attorneys to render many of the services that the act allows. There's where you have the two contradictions of California law and federal law that the Immigration Consultant Act has provided, and that's the reason for trying to reform, ban this area. And now we know why, because of what's happening on the ground. And more concern as immigration reform and the Farm Worker Modernization Act continues through the Congress. Next slide. So where are we? Well, as I said, SB 670 by Senator Caballero passed the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. It should be 704, I'm sorry. There were 7 senators voted for it, none voted against, and 4 stayed off. So 4 of the senators did not vote in support or oppose. And 2 senators actually made comment on why this is an important area. So the senator introduces this, which is essentially the same as Wesso's bill, but it also looked at addressing some more protections. So here are the protections it outlines. They're going to change the name from immigration consultant to form preparer, for example. They're going to prohibit notary publics to use immigration consultants in their work. It's going to also include July 1st, 2022, that every 2 years thereafter, a form preparer should complete a course on the limits of authorized services and prohibited activities. And then also it prohibits what forms consultants can do. And the forms are listed here for applications for asylum and for withholding removal, applications for T status visas, U visas, and special SIJs, special immigrant juvenile justice issues, status cases. So trying to get here through this time. The other thing that happened, organizations were providing amendments and opposition. As you can imagine, the consultants and the notaries supported this bill. They came out and testified in support. CRLA Foundation, along with Chirla Carecen, opposed the bill. LA County opposed unless amended and asked for these following changes. So, and this is where we'll be at today with regards to this bill. So one, change immigration form assistant to form preparer. Then change that requirement I listed. So that means that now which is every 2 years or after, a form preparer should complete this course on the limits of authorized services and prohibited activities, and then restores the enforcement mechanism that allows any other party to bring an action for injunctive relief. The bill had lifted that up, means there was no mechanism for justice. So this allows it back in. So it's restored. So what's that mean? Next slide. Eduardo. So where are we? Well, at this hearing, LA County requested 4 additional amendments. 1, prohibit new immigration consultant registrations. So those consultants already registered will essentially be grandfathered in, can continue, but no new consultants can register. 2, it provides for conspicuous and clear disclosures of what they're doing and providing that to their clients. It expands the list of prohibited immigration forms, and Mario hit on it. One of them is the admissibility waivers. The other is, for example, the 485 adjustment waivers, adjustment forms, sorry. So those 2 expands it. Then it sets a fee cap that reflects strict clerical function consultants are authorized to provide, ensuring that the fee cap encompasses completion of forms and all ancillary services, which doesn't exist now. So they can charge whatever they want. This fee cap will rein them in as to what they can charge. So what happened to those amendments? Want to share with you that Senator Caballero, on the floor of the Senate Judiciary Committee, in her closing remarks, committed to accept these 4 LA County proposed amendments. So that's where we are. This now bill goes to appropriations, and then once it gets out of appropriations, expecting that these amendments are input in, it goes to the Senate floor. So that's where the bill is. At that point, we'll have to see what the language looks like, and based on these amendments, and then organizations will be, I assume, taking positions on it. I'm not going to touch on that issue. On what you do or not do, feel free to contact me after, or any of the other organizations. I'll be feel free to talk to you about it. So that's in essence where we are with this issue of consumer protections and the unlawful practice of law with regards to immigration consultants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noe and Mario, for this great, presentation that each of you provided. That really, really goes hand in hand and complement each other. And thank you for leading the way on these issues, both at the policy front and at the direct service provision to both of you. So thank you very much. So we're going to move on to our next panelist. I'm very happy and pleased to introduce, Katherine Kristolikov from KIND. KIND is Kids in Need of Defense. Katherine has been a supervising attorney at KIND since April 2016. Prior to joining KIND, Katherine worked as an immigration attorney, providing direct representation to a Bay Area nonprofit organization. Katherine's caseload included asylum, visa, VAWA, DACA, special immigrant juvenile status, humanitarian parole, provisional waivers, naturalization, consular processing, and family-based visas. Katherine received her JD from Santa Clara University School of Law, where she earned a social justice and public interest certificate. Katherine is licensed to practice in the state of California. And Katherine will be talking about KIND's work representing children and youth in various, immigration cases. And we are very happy to have a representative from KIND be here today. So thank you so much, Katherine, for joining us.
Thank you, Eduardo. Can you hear me okay?
Great, thank you.
Great. So I'm trying to share my screen, but that's been disabled, it says, by the host.
Let me go ahead and try that.
Yeah, no problem. I'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone. As Eduardo mentioned, my name is Katherine Kristolikov, and I'm a supervising attorney for Kids in Need of Defense in our San Francisco and Fresno offices. I'm going to give a little bit of background about KIND and our work in the Central Valley. There we go. Thank you, Eduardo. Mm-hmm. Great. So KIND is a global nonprofit organization that was established in 2008, and we're dedicated solely to the protection of unaccompanied immigrant children, immigrant and refugee children who arrive in the United States alone as children without a parent or legal guardian. Our mission focuses on 3 different guiding principles to ensure that no child is forced to appear in immigration court alone without high quality legal representation. We work to advance laws, policies, and practices that ensure children's protection and uphold their right to due process and fundamental fairness. And lastly, we promote durable solutions to child migration in countries of origin, transit, and destination that are grounded in the best interests of the child, and to ensure that no child is forced to involuntarily migrate. So KIND has expanded immensely since 2008, and we work within 4 major programs. Our legal services program provides pro bono representation and other legal services to detained and released unaccompanied children in removal proceedings. We do this through direct representation with our staff attorneys at any of our field offices, and through a large pro bono mentorship program for attorneys that are at partner law firms, organizations, corporations, and law schools. We also have a social services program that helps KIND clients and unaccompanied children across the US adjust to a new country, language, home, and community, and to help address the trauma that most have experienced in their home countries. Our field offices have 2 social services coordinators, one based in San Francisco that works on Bay Area cases, and then one in Fresno who works with unaccompanied children in the Central Valley to provide culturally appropriate referrals to assist clients with their non-legal needs. Our policy and advocacy team works to promote the fair and appropriate treatment of unaccompanied children. And lastly, our international programs team works in Mexico, Central America, the UK, and across Europe to ensure safety and well-being of children alone throughout their migration process. So I've thrown the term unaccompanied child, or UC, around quite a bit already. I'm sure many of you on this call and on this panel are very familiar with the term, and if not, at least heard it in the news as of late. But the legal definition of an unaccompanied child is an individual who's under 18 years of age, does not have a parent or legal guardian in the United States available to provide for their care and physical custody at the time they're apprehended by immigration officials, and they have no lawful immigration status. What's important in this determination is that it's made when the child is initially apprehended by immigration officials. So of course, many subsequently reunite with a parent, may obtain a legal guardian through an immigration form of relief called special immigrant juvenile status, or turn 18 years of age. But this UC determination sticks with them under current law throughout the pendency of their legal case, which can be several years, as many of you are aware of, unless that UC determination is stripped by the Department of Homeland Security. It's critical to unaccompanied children to retain that determination because it permits them certain benefits in seeking legal relief here in the United States within our immigration system. And it's more appropriate for children that are in removal proceedings alone. As we all know, turning 18 doesn't magically turn you into an adult or erase any of the vulnerabilities you faced the day before. And so it's an important thing to protect for these children. So why do unaccompanied children come to the United States? Why would a child take that journey? Many are escaping gang violence or gang recruitment, primarily in the Northern Triangle or in Mexico. Others are fleeing child abuse or neglect in the home. They may not have an adequate caretaker. Their parent may have migrated to the United States when they were younger to be able to provide for them, and their caretaker in home country may no longer be able to take care of them. So they may have nobody left and are coming to the United States in search of a caretaker. Others are fleeing persecution based on race, religion, nationality, familial ties, and many other different factors. Others are leaving deep levels of poverty and hoping to find a brighter future here in the United States. Unaccompanied children also are fleeing and escaping domestic, sexual, or gender-based violence and seeking reunification with a caretaker here in the United States, better economic opportunities and an education if that's not available to them in their home country, and lastly, safety and security among many factors. So unaccompanied children are the population that KIND works with. We don't represent adults or sponsors. Our funding is tied to unaccompanied children. I think important to note for UCs is that they're automatically placed into deportation or removal proceedings upon that UC determination. So they're all in active removal proceedings here in San Francisco in Northern California. And there's no right to government appointed counsel in removal proceedings, even for unaccompanied children. So if a child can't afford an attorney, if they can't find one, if they don't have transportation options to even get to a consultation to see if someone can take their case, they're forced to move forward in removal proceedings alone in front of a judge against a government-trained ICE trial attorney who's actively trying to deport them from the country. Because of this, there's a large gap in undocumented children and unaccompanied children that have attorneys, and even those attorneys that can handle full removal cases. As you've heard today from the other panelists, cases can be really complex, involving a state court process and a number of different immigration federal agencies with really long timelines that we've seen increased due to Trump administration policies, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and also visa backlogs. We're still facing processing and adjudication delay times from this. And in the past 4 years, we've seen so many erosions of protections for unaccompanied children, and that process has just become even more challenging for them. In this fiscal year alone, I think we're 5 months in, over 1,000 unaccompanied children have been released to sponsors living in California. 2 years ago, in 2019, that number was over 8,000 in California alone. We expect the numbers to increase significantly this year and to surge with large numbers of children at the border, in shelters, and coming to the United States. As of April 15th, there were over 22,000 children in federal custody, 22,000 alone. It's a historic high, and children are being held at emergency intake sites, mostly in California and in Texas, with California being one of the top states for the eventual release of unaccompanied children to sponsors. So I want to talk a little bit more about our presence in the Central Valley. Our KIND San Francisco and Fresno offices opened in 2016, and we provide services to unaccompanied children in San Joaquin, Stanislaus, Merced, Madera, Fresno, Kings, Tulare, San Francisco, Alameda, and Contra Costa counties. So we cover a large geographic span of Northern California. And we provide pro bono legal representation to unaccompanied children in their removal proceedings before EOIR and in seeking permanent legal relief here in the United States, a separate process for unaccompanied children, whether that's asylum, special immigrant juvenile status, visas available to trafficking victims, and other forms of legal relief. We also represent children in long-term federal foster care programs at California state licensed facilities within Northern California. So we currently represent 140 unaccompanied children in the Central Valley in these counties you see here on the chart, and 500 unaccompanied children across all of our counties that we cover. 242 cases that we have out of our 500 are with over 335 pro bono attorneys through partner organizations and law firms. As all the panelists today mentioned, representation and access to representation in the Central Valley is really challenging, and there isn't sufficient representation there or funding. And so KIND looks to bridge this gap through our pro bono mentorship program, mentoring attorneys from firms and corporations in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, and across Northern California to be able to bridge this gap and hopefully meet the need of unaccompanied children in the Central Valley. Since 2016, we've received over 850 referrals. So the presence is there and there are ongoing needs. In addition to the Central Valley having a large growing population of unaccompanied children, the Valley, I think, should also expect a really large number of UCs coming soon, along with a very high need for legal services and post-release services. Unaccompanied kids are not in the state child welfare system. There are no coordinated post-release services for the majority of the children that we work with. This, in addition to no legal counsel, means that most kids are rendered extremely vulnerable to poor health and educational outcomes, potential future abuse, trafficking, and further victimization. Children who don't get coordinated services and support are more likely to be subjected to ICE enforcement, particularly when they turn 18, and taken back to ICE custody for various reasons. The pandemic has only amplified this issue. Unaccompanied kids are often highly reliant on the education system, and we know that child abuse across the nation has increased in the past year. Vaccine equity is also a huge problem for the children that we represent. And I really think, our advocacy services, resources, and attention really needs to be paid to what happens to these kids after they're released after they leave the border and after they're released from the Office of Refugee Resettlement. This is really where the Central Valley and our organizations can come together to support kids post-release when most of their legal cases will actually play out. Again, over 22,000 kids are in federal custody as of 2 weeks ago, and they'll be in our community soon. And we need to work together to provide them with support. There's not enough funding for legal removal defense, specifically for unaccompanied children. And we need to make sure that funding does include UCs where possible, especially in the Central Valley, and looking to expand those services so that we can adequately support them. So I know I'm close on time. I want to be cognizant of that, but I listed some California legislation here that KIND is currently supporting along with many of our partner organizations, highlighting AB 1140, the Unaccompanied Immigrant Child Protection Act. As I mentioned before, KIND's San Francisco and Fresno offices provide services to children in state licensed long-term federal foster care. And this bill clarifies that the ombudsperson of foster care serves unaccompanied children who are in federal custody as well. And that includes investigating complaints. Otherwise, there's no oversight, educating child care program staff about state licensing obligations, ensuring the child's ability to exercise their right to communicate with parents, family members, and sponsors, and to access resources in their own languages. Not all of the kids we work with are English or Spanish speaking. There's a large population of Indigenous clients, particularly in San Joaquin County, and being able to access those resources and legal counsel in their own language is critical to their support and success here in the United States. And then lastly, assisting with flexible and alternative educational options, knowing that many of the children we work with may have not attended traditional school, high school, and as many of the other panelists have spoken about, assisting in that process to make it as culturally appropriate for that child as possible. I've included a list of those here. I'm sorry, I ran out of time to go through the others, but if you're interested, I'm happy to stick on and speak about those in more detail. I've included my contact information here. Please feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to chat, so feel free to reach out. And I will pass it back to you, Eduardo, for the next panelist.
Great. Thank you so much, Katherine, for a very great presentation. And I encourage you all to reach out should you have any follow-up questions or would like to learn more about the great work that KAN has been doing in the Central Valley, so in other regions of the state as well. And next we have, the honor of also having another speaker, which let me pull up so I could properly introduce them. So I'm very pleased to introduce you to Hugo Morales. He is a co-founder and executive director of Radio Bilingue, the National Latino Public Radio network. The mission of Radio Bilingue is to serve as a voice to empower Latinos and other underserved communities. And the majority of Radio Bilingue listeners are from lower income families. Radio Bilingue serves the San Joaquin Valley with 3 full power FM radio stations with news and information in Spanish, English, and Mixteco. Radio Bilingue is a key partner on COVID-19 prevention vaccine campaign and played a key role for census outreach to reach the hard to count. No broadband, no non-English speaking populations. Ms. Morales was awarded a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship in 1994 and the Edward R. Murrow Award, public broadcasting's highest honor, in 1999. Ms. Morales is a Mixtec Indian from Oaxaca, Mexico, who migrated at age of 9 in 1958 to work in the Northern California with his family, his farm working family. He graduated from Harvard College in 1972 and Harvard Law School in 1975. He serves on the board of the Rosenberg Foundation, is a Fresno First 5 commissioner, and a past trustee of the California State University. He is the elected chair of all the schools in Fresno Unified School District Advisory Committee that advises Fresno Unified on how to use its funds to address the needs of English learners, disabled, homeless, and low-income students enrolled in Fresno Unified. And Hugo, go ahead and take it away. We're more than happy to have you here. And thank you so much for joining us. And, feel free to have your 12 allotted minutes or as long as you'd like to discuss related issues in the community to immigrant communities that have been issues existing over generations and some new ones as well. Thank you so much, Hugo.
Well, thank you so much, Eduardo. And maybe what I can do is shorten my time to enable maybe some of the panel, some of the participants to ask questions of other panelists as well, and to further the conversation. So I will just take a few minutes. Again, my name is Hugo Morales, and thank you, Eduardo. I want to thank my fellow speakers and presenters in the center of the CRLA Health Foundation. And today I want to talk about the street vendors. This afternoon, I want to talk about the violence against Indigenous immigrants. The local press in Fresno, they then identified the victims that I will refer to as Indigenous Mixteco, but that is what they are. They are members of my indigenous tribe from Southern Mexico who migrated to this country for lack of educational and economic opportunity in our home country in Mexico. As a class, as a people, we are among the poorest class of citizens in Mexico as Indigenous people. Many of you may have seen the film Roma, the case of one of our tribe members who is a maid in the Roma middle-class neighborhood in Mexico City. One of the victims, his name is Lorenzo, or was his name Lorenzo Perez. He was killed recently on March 21st on a Sunday as he was selling paletas in Fresno. Another street vendor, Jose Luis Rivera, was selling corn last November in my neighborhood in the Tower District here in Fresno. So these are Indigenous Mixtecos who left behind them children who are U.S. citizens and wives. These are impoverished families who obviously the breadwinner, these street vendors, were out there to try to make a decent living in the way that they could, considering the lack of education, the lack of papeles, the lack of papers, So they expose themselves not only to the long hours, but also in the treacherous heat that they have to go through, and all that walking that they got to go through in our neighborhoods, and so on, but also to violence. And that is unfortunate that this kind of experience be done against our indigenous people, along with, indigenous Southeast Asian members of our community, Punjab, and other street vendors and small shop vendors here in our San Joaquin Valley. And I just want to mention that these were hardworking fathers, undocumented, and I just can't have to cite about how important it is to us to remember the people came here as immigrants, including Mixtecos, because they want to work. They are hardworking members of our community, and for trying to make a decent living, they get shot at and killed. So part of our traditions, actually, as a Mixteco people, are as working to be hard workers and also to volunteer in our community. That's part of our cultura. That's part of our culture. And it's just so sad to see members of our family assaulted and killed in this manner. Just want to thank council members Esmeralda Soria, Miguel Arias, Luis Chavez, Nelson Esparza, and other concerned citizens who raised money for these, for the children of these families. I want to also thank Centro Binacional, our own Indigenous Advocacy service organization led by Zapotecos and Mixtecos to advocate and provide services for the needy families in our community. And I just also want to remind people that Radio Bilingue, the reason why I co-founded Radio Bilingue as an immigrant, as a Mixteco, was to serve the community. And on Sundays, we are committed a whole block of 5 hours to reach our indigenous communities, Mixteco, Triqui, Zapoteco, and other communities through our own languages, and using or having giving the mic to people from our own communities as facilitators of that conversation. So I invite people to tune in and be introduced to our music and our conversaciones every Sunday on 91.5 FM and also 88.7 to the north and 90.1 FM to the south in Kern County. And just want to emphasize that we're one of the few radio services that reaches the entire San Joaquin Valley, and we welcome all our partners to use the airwaves to reach the communities that we serve through Radio Bilingue and you serve on the ground. That is my remarks, Eduardo.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hugo. And I invite you all as well, to tune in. Radio Bilingue it's a huge, tool and partner to many organizations in the San Joaquin Valley. California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, is, always very, very pleased and honored to be invited or to ask to be invited. Whenever we have an issue of concern that we want to communicate to our community, given their broad reach and their great programs also on Sunday, which, as Hugo mentioned, reaches very, very diverse community as well, and a critical community as well. Our Mixteco community across the state, wherever Radio Bilingue reaches. So thank you so much for the incredible work that you've been leading, Hugo, you and your team. We have several minutes, about 8 minutes for questions or comments. We can open it up to any individuals who want to drop any questions on the chat box, or if any individuals, from Facebook Live who might want to comment or have any questions. We open the floor to you all.
Well, since nobody is taking the floor, why don't I turn to Alice and then ask Allison, what do you see the possibility of getting some kind of immigration reform happening in the next couple of years. I guess that's the only opportunity we have, right? I mean, for sure. What prospects do you see? Or what's the talk among the immigration specialists on the legal side?
That's the $1 million question, right? Hugo, is what's happening in Congress. I mean, we are seeing a lot of movement. There's several bills that have been introduced. The comprehensive bill, kind of referred to as the Biden plan, at this moment isn't moving forward, but that did have a legalization program outlined that would have addressed the status of many, not all, of the undocumented community members in the country today, and did a lot of other things too around different aspects of our immigration system. So that comprehensive plan is not moving forward right now. What is moving forward are what we call kind of smaller standalone bills that target specific constituencies within the immigrant community. So things like the DREAM Act that would help the quote unquote dreamer type population, people who came to the US as minors and can, comply with certain other requirements. The Dream and Promise Act, the Secure Act, things that would benefit TPS recipients. So folks who have had TPS, which is a temporary status for people from certain countries that have been designated by the United States as a TPS country and have been renewing for years. Finally, we're trying to address getting those folks a permanent form of status. So that's another kind of category of folks that might benefit from one of these discrete bills. There's the farm worker bill also moving forward. And then there's a larger essential worker bill that would include farm workers, but also folks who do important work in other sectors as well. So, those standalone bills are the things that have the most traction. Whether they can get to 60 votes is a tough question. If any of that is attached to an infrastructure bill or something else that would only require a simple majority, the 51 votes, that would be, make it much more likely because we have seen a couple of things, Dream and Promise Act and the Farm Worker Bill already passed in the House, but we just don't know what's going to happen on the Senate side. So a lot of unknowns, a lot of movement. I think the next few months will be really, really critical. So the large comprehensive bill doesn't look as likely, but some of these discrete bills, people are working really hard to see that they move forward and they don't get cluttered with limitations, that they're as inclusive as possible for folks who have had prior contact with law enforcement, immigration authorities, things like that.
Wonderful. Great question, Irwan. Thank you so much, Allison. Great explanation. Another question that we have here, and I'll go ahead and allow Katherine to respond and others can chime in as well. So this question comes from Irlanda Ramirez. Thank you so much, Irlanda Ramirez, for submitting this question. We appreciate it. The question is, what steps have been taken to reunite the kids with their parents so far? And if reunification is not possible, what's going to happen to these children?
Yeah, that's a great question, Irlanda. I think, for children that are in ORR custody, the ORR is responsible for screening potential sponsors for children, unaccompanied children, to be released to. And they go through a process, a background check, making sure that the relationship, actually does exist and that it would be a safe environment for the child to be released to, and that they would have access to adequate housing and education. The Biden administration has already adopted a range of measures to accelerate the reunification process, mainly because of the influx and backlog of unaccompanied children at the border. There used to be an information sharing agreement between ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and the Department of Homeland Security, where people who wanted to be sponsors for unaccompanied children would have to submit their information to the government, to the to ORR, and then they would share that information with the Department of Homeland Security. That obviously raises concerns and I think some hesitation for sponsors who are undocumented of wanting to submit that information, and rightfully so. And that policy agreement has been rescinded. Whether or not that information is getting out to sponsors is another kind of public messaging issue, but that's one step that has been has been taken as well. The administration has also authorized overtime pay for ORR case managers to continue to work on expediting this release process, and authorization by the federal government of payment of costs associated of transporting unaccompanied children from their ORR shelter, which may be, many are in Arizona, Texas, and California, but we have kids coming from New York. And in the past, who is responsible for that airfare? It would be the sponsor. And do they have the money to do that? That can cause prolonged detention and slow down the release. So there has been some authorization and steps taken by this administration to expedite that process. If a child cannot be released to a parent or sponsor, they do have to stay in ORR facilities. It's not a jail, but it is a detention facility. They're not free to leave. And they must remain in those facilities throughout the pendency of their case. There are programs such as long-term federal foster care for children who are deemed to be lower risk, whatever that means, and how that's determined is a little gray area, where they can live in the community and kind of traditional foster home settings throughout the pendency of their case. But often, the reality is that children don't want to remain in those facilities, and they will seek what's called voluntary departure, or want to return to their home country. And the reasons that they're fleeing their home country, are still existing. So it is a really dangerous situation, and that's why I think expediting the process, getting the information out about sponsorship process is particularly critical for these kids.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katherine. That's very, very helpful background and information. Another, issue that, one of our panelists would like to kind of touch base upon, in the next minute or two is about, some of the work that has been going on addressing anti-Asian American hate crimes in our communities. So Thad, do you want to comment on that? So Thad, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry, I didn't hear my name. Yeah, I was planning to talk about the Asian hate crime in my presentation, but it was because my client was sharing the story so long, so I didn't have a chance. But let me share the screen again. So here, this is the Asian hate, anti-Asian trend that we get it from the CSU. They do a study, and we can see that the trend is going up. But we try to looking for the data for Central Valley, but it's very difficult for us to get that kind of data. So, but I just want to share, like from 2019 to 2020, you see the trend is going really high right now, and the highest right now is California and New York. And the closest area for us is San Francisco and San Jose. Is these like the fourth and the fifth, and it's go up every day. What I'm trying to say here is right now, APSARA, I would like to announce an open arm to any partner here on the panelists and also the attendee as well, that interest to be partner with us. We are looking to collecting the data. First of all, we want to do a survey for about 200 family in our area, Stockton, and we're also looking to do like in Merced, Fresno, and all the way to Sacramento as well, to form a compelling data so that we know how we can like encounter it. And then so far we have do a survey about roughly about 20 family that they are close to a Stockton area. So we do in the south, the central, and the north. And the majority of the senior right now, they are afraid to walk outside their home at the park area and also in downtown Stockton. Before there's a flea market in downtown Stockton, but since COVID, they closed. So there's like no much activity. But since I think California will open soon in June, we asked many of them say that they may not go. So there's a trend that many people were hesitating to planning to do. And even though myself, I have experience in my own. I went to the gym and people look at me and I can tell that they the tension, and also that I also have the same feeling about the senior who are very vulnerable to those type of crime, and we were seeing people pushing the senior, and he almost got killed in San Francisco, in San Jose, in Oakland, but they were so quiet because they're afraid to talk. So we were thinking partnering with the partner that we have here, getting the data and looking to have another conversation so that we can all have a program or have an activity for that. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. That's very, very great. Thank you for highlighting it. We had another question, and thank you to those who were staying on. We understand if you need to log off, it's totally understandable, but we appreciate those who are able to stay a couple more minutes. Well, we had a question regarding, whether or not do you think that, hate crimes against street vendors may be underreported?
Oh, it definitely is. I think a lot of what happens in these kind of situations, like, these folks are generally undocumented, many of them, and they don't have any choice. And to be able to report any kind of abuse, they would be taking a risk. Probably they don't know where to report it, right? I mean, many of these folks are also illiterate. So, it's really definitely something that is underreported, and I mean, these people live in stress. I mean, they're hiding from the migra, right? And yet they go into the street where they can be easily picked up and identified. So it's, and plus living in stress that they got to work so hard to feed their families. So this is definitely, well, one of the things I want to, that's why I really wanted to speak today, is that the local press and some, does not identify these folks as being indigenous. We know that the Asian community is being attacked, and rightly so that they are identified. But why don't we identify, victims? Somehow, I think there's something behind there that can be addressed at some point. But anyway. But yeah, I think it is underreported for the reasons that other panelists here have said it already.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugo. Thank you so much, Socorro, for posing that question through Facebook Live. I think, we're at time, so I tremendously thank everyone for participating here today. And as many of you on the attendee side and on Facebook Live are probably wondering, okay, well, how can we learn more? How can we get engaged? What are some of the other work, that we've been doing on the ground to address the very issues that we talked about today? Well, that's why we're going to be providing part 2 to this panel. And I invite all of you to join tomorrow. Join us tomorrow from 12 to 2. We're going to be hearing from the change makers themselves. We're going to be hearing from an excellent panel who's going to be talking about what are some of the work that they've been doing on the ground to address some of these issues, from notarial fraud to, to increasing the capacity of legal representation for those in removal proceedings in the region, to what are some of the safety net, some of the inclusive economic recovery efforts have been gone underway, and how has local institutions like, for example, the Unified School Districts played a role in aiding successful immigrant incorporation. So we invite you to attend tomorrow. It's going to be from 12 to 2. So hope you can join us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat box, but we'll also be posting this recording and the materials in the near future. So we hope to hear from you and to see you engage with us in the future. So thank you, everyone.